The GEEX Flame Affinity Group will meet twice this year. In addition to tonight's discussion, we'll meet this March to discuss equity and access in public and private spaces. We hope you'll join us again then. Tonight's discussion topics will include: what do you make and who is your audience? How do you price your work, content, or professional services? How do you make a living as a glassworker? What are some glass-related opportunities that generate income? What professional practice topics are important now? How does the impact of economics affect your studio practice? And we want to give a huge thanks to our sponsors for this meeting, High Volume Oxygen and ABR Imagery. High Volume Oxygen is proud to sponsor this meeting of the GEEX Flame Affinity Group. Are you ready to be oxygen independent? The HVO system is built by glassblowers for glassblowers. High Volume Oxygen has oxygen solutions for flameworking studios of all sizes and is in studios and institutions around the world. Why choose HVO over other systems? Expandability, reliability, and safety. Join the oxygen revolution. Find out more at highvolumeoxygen.com. ABR carries a full line of North Star, Glass Alchemy, Momca, Cymex, Elvis, Tag Glass, and Gilson Opals, just to list a few. ABR also carries all the tools you will need to start glassworking, from bench rollers, molds, lathes, fume hoods, frit trays, and accessories, to electroforming kits, measurement devices, molds, reamers, titanium pens, graphite tools, and many more. And I'd just like to say thank you to our sponsors. And also, I just built a studio and purchased my equipment, my oxygen equipment from HVO and my big kiln from ABR. So thanks a lot, very reliable. Thank you all for your engagement with GEEX tonight. We will follow up this meeting with consolidated and edited notes from this meeting and the edited recording in a few weeks. As a reminder to throw some support towards GEEX if you're able, so we can keep this platform going. Thank you. All right, so tonight, our goals tonight are to survey the many avenues of generating income through flameworking and glass-adjacent content. We're going to consider points of entry into marketplaces and discuss monetization strategies. How have opportunities for making a living through glassworking shifted, and how do we adapt? So we'll start off our first prompt. I just wanted, for those of you who are new here, there are a few ways to get involved. And first, before I move on, I just want to introduce my co-facilitator, Madeline Rile Smith. She's waving. And we're going to tag team the facilitation for tonight and just kind of help keep order. And so I'm Amy Lemaire, and I will start the facilitation, and then we'll switch about midway, and Madeline will take over. So we have a couple ways that you can participate in the discussion tonight. You can work the chat. Highly, if you feel comfortable with that, work the chat. And then also, if you'd like to address the group verbally, either on video or just speaking, please use the hand raise function, which is in the bottom button in the center. It's a little hand. And Madeline or I will call on you so that we can kind of keep order in the group. So that's how we'll proceed tonight. And let's start with our first prompt for the evening, which is kind of an introductory prompt. We would like to know, what do you make and who is your audience? So I'll go first as an example. So I, as far as flamework goods go, I make a lot of jewelry, and my audience for that is contemporary jewelry market, mostly collectors and people who like large jewelry, mostly. And then also I have, that's as far as money making goes, my big source of my own work. But then I do a lot of glass adjacent gigs as well. I do a lot of public speaking, lecturing, and teaching as an advocate for flameworking. And that's all paid gig, and some consultation as well for shipping and crating of glass, particularly delicate and flame-worked items. And then I also do fabrication for other artists. And so I guess my audience for that would be the contemporary art world. I live in Brooklyn, and there's a lot of opportunities to basically make prep for other artists who use those glass parts in mixed media sculpture. So would anybody like to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what you make and who's your audience? And let me just see, I need to get the info sheet up here so I can see. Here we go. All right, so if anybody would like to say something, just go ahead and use the hand raise function.
I'm raising my hand.
Oh, I see Janine. Okay, out of the box thinker as usual. Go ahead.
Hi, I want to go first because I have to put my kid to bed. My name is Janine,
Okay.
and I have been doing glass torch work for like 25 years, mostly jewelry, trying to make things that I haven't really seen before, but like unusual glass beads and glass chains. I spent a year making glass chains for Calvin Klein's runway shows. I also teach glass and I teach other things. But now I'm pivoting because I kind of retired from jewelry recently, which is liberating, but it's because I want to do harder, bigger things. And I'm currently in grad school for illustration because I'm making dioramas of handmade glass and laser cut textile fantasy landscapes that I'm photographing to illustrate children's books that I already wrote.
Very cool.
That is so cool.
Awesome. I can't wait to see that. And I also just wanted to mention too, just to keep this prompt really accessible, that when we're talking about flameworking, that also includes neon and plasma, people who are just kind of messing around with flameworking, people who use torches in the hot shop, however you feel included in the group, like feel free to share. That's what we're here for. So just want everybody to feel welcome. All right. And let's see. Madeline.
Yeah, I'll go next. Yeah, totally. I also want to reiterate what Amy said. Like, this is for people who are like flame curious, is what I like to call them. So you don't have to be like, like feel like you're a certain level or like professional or anything like that in flame worker. It's just wonderful to get to meet people and see how they use flame working in so many different ways. And yeah, for me, I kind of also, what I make is if I make a few different things, like I do sculpture, I do performance art with flame working. And in those senses, I think my audience is kind of the general public. Like I try to make my work sort of accessible. And I sort of like want it to have a sort of a wider entry point. And then I also do fabrication for artists, which in that case, I guess my audience are the contemporary artists or whoever their audience is. And that is a bigger part of my income stream, I would think. And then I think that splitting my life up also into like a production side, doing jewelry as well, which has a much more of a specific audience. I feel like jewelry, there's so many aesthetics you can have for that. And there's like sort of like contemporary jewelry or more like, production implosion side. So kind of split up into there as well. So that's just a little bit about me. It's just sort of branching out in all different directions and not being one thing.
I feel like that's pretty common, diversifying your income stream. I know that's something, I feel like I've been a gig worker for the past 25 years, and with lots of different income streams that are all flame working related or adjacent. That's sort of the common theme. And we had a note in the chat here. Brittany says, I'm flame curious. I've been making mostly marbles and implosion pendants. That's great. Marbles, I know there's a collector market for marbles, and implosion pendants as well. I think those are pretty popular items as far as jewelry goes too, and like kind of a great way to kind of get your stuff out there in the world. All right, Molly.
Hi, I'm Molly. So I have been a hot glass worker for, I guess, almost 20 years, but I have started to become more flame curious. I've taken a couple soft glass classes and a boro class, but then don't have don't have a studio that I've been keeping up those skills that I gain in an intensive format. But what I'm really curious about doing is including bits and pieces that are sculpted on the torch to use into my larger sculptures, kind of reusing glass from the hot shop to then repurpose, and then also get into more of a maybe potentially a product line related to those things. I make a lot of stuff that looks like plants and succulents and coral and stuff like that. So anyway, and that's where I'm at. So.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, that seems like using flameworking in your hot glass work could be a way to really make your work really unique. Joe, want to unmute yourself?
Hello. I guess I'm going to throw maybe a kind of wrench in the thing, because I am doing a lot of stuff around flame working that I guess a lot of people don't get involved with. I would say my audience is myself at this point, because I am just really interested in exploring the medium. I do a lot of research and development. I do a lot of material science kind of stuff, trying to figure out and understand glass more. I write up some of the stuff that I come up with that other people can read and hopefully kind of get a jumping off point. This past February, I got the chance to go to Penland's winter residency for a week, where I worked on Flamework ceramics and glass. So, I mean, I'm lucky to be able to do this, because I spent about over a decade in tech and managed to kind of save up enough resources to kind of not have to rely too much on working in the glass to kind of make it sustainable. And the more I explore, the more I kind of realize that the interesting stuff isn't going to be sustainable in the beginning. Like the work in the beginning has to start somewhere. And that's the work that I'm interested in. And I mean, sustainability, maybe find some way to make the money beforehand, and then once you have it, actually do what you want to do, which I feel very lucky to be able to do right now.
Absolutely, that's a great point. I'm on a building year as well, where last year was the year I really saved up and took a whole bunch of work, and so that this year I could take more creative risks and build a new audience with my own sculpture. So right on, I would put that in the research and development category. Mose, let's hear from you. Hi, long time no see.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah, cool. Yeah, long time no see. It's been like 4 days. Chris Mosley, go by Mose. I've been doing glass 11 years now. And I have like two parts of it, right? Like there was a few years ago where I was pretty much flame working when I was living in LA. And I actually, to bring in side money, was actually making pipes. It was just seemed to be the hustle. It kind of seemed to be the thing. I didn't really have access to a hot shop. Renting time is expensive. And if anyone knows California, especially LA, there's not that many community spaces to actually rent time in the first place. So, slinging pipes, whether it was First Fridays, LA Walk, there's on First Fridays, they have basically you set up a table downtown in LA and people just kind of walk by and, you know, you sling it pretty much out of your trunk. I would also do some consignments at pipe shops. And then also I was just like hitting people kind of up in the streets. You know, I'd meet somebody and I would just be like, hey, you know, are you interested in some glass? And I also worked at REI once. In that sense of working at REI, you know, you wear these vests at REI, and I used to make snails with like little pins on them. So I would sell those to my fellow employees at work. So LA was a really cool scene for that. It really got me to respect all the pipe people and the hustle and just what it takes on like the just all out grind. Nowadays I actually kind of learned this a little bit from Joe Lee when I met him, because he was the older gentleman at school like I was. But he was very much in a better financial situation than I was. And I quickly picked up on that, how he was able to do the things he was able to do and not really have a job, where I was like on the struggle bus. So in the last 4 years, I've been able to get a job in tech, doing research and development, prototyping in Silicon Valley. I work in Silicon Valley. And that really set me up to where I'm at now, where I have a corporate scientific job with Bruce Suba as my mentor, doing glass to metal seals and working with various things in glass as well. And then that has kind of set me up to now be in a position to just make my work for fun, just to be an artist. I currently have a show going now, which I'm actually, after this, I'm probably going to go to because I got First Friday tomorrow and I got set up. But I've been working with Amy with Plasma. I've been being able just to kind of create and not worry about if I make $1 off of it. The bills are already kind of paid in that sense. So it's been a really a breath of fresh air to finally sit down and think about what I want to make or just create stuff and not have to worry about keeping the lights on. But I feel like for me, it was starting with that, like selling stuff out of the trunk, that really made me like work for it. And then also made me realize that I don't want to live this way. You know, like I want to be able to take a vacation. I want to be able to, not worry as I get older, which then got me to pivot to being able to think about my glass in a different way.
Thank you, Mose. And also, I just want to add too that you flame work for a living, so you're getting paid to practice your skills that you can then use for your side hustles. So it's all related, which I think is really smart.
That's the best part. Is I think at the end of the day, like a bad day at work isn't that bad because I still get to play with glass and I still I get to learn. And if I do have any questions, I can just ask Bruce on about anything and you can pretty much answer the question, or if not, figure it out. So it's been a blessing on that end as well. And I think flameworking more than, I work with a lot of different COEs right now. And I think flameworking was the one that kind of got me to diversify. It was the one, like Hot Shop, you don't learn about so much. It's just kind of like make the thing, work for the gaffer, do that. Flameworking, coming from Salem, got me to start understanding even what a COE is. I didn't even hear that terminology until I started taking the scientific glass program at Salem, which then got me to kind of slow down because, flameworking is a slow down process. It got me to then slow down and start thinking about, let me draw this out on a blueprint or a piece of paper or a CAD file and then fabricate it where, in the hot shops, kind of like on the floor on some chalk, and you just go and you have that window. So I think flameworking for me has been like a slowing down process, and then has allowed my brain to think about my next move instead of just reacting.
Right on. Sally.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I've been doing this since 1970, and so I still have my own business, but I also do scientific apparatus, and it gives me the ability to do whatever I want. When I ran my own business and people were like, "Oh, can you make that but out of this color?" I'm like, "Oh, you might as well be working at McDonald's, right?" So, you should. We were talking about this before the meeting. You really need to do what you love and that you're passionate about, and somehow finance it. Yeah.
Thank you, Sally. Brooke. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, Brooke. I can't hear you.
Here we are.
There you go.
Hi. I'm Kristen. My husband is Brooke. We both run a glass art studio here in British Columbia. And we only have one device. We actually live very rurally. So I thought this was a great opportunity for me to kind of key in a little bit more to our industry and what we do without having to travel so incredibly far. I wanted to also make a note real quick about what Sally said, because she is absolutely amazing. And that was just awesome to see her up here. But I would just wanted to say that it was, one of the things that I wanted to mention was that with glassblowing, we often tell people that it's about building a community, right, for your work, and really just learning what your community needs from you as a flame worker, and just kind of finding your niche within that. So, you hear so many people kind of saying, well, I eventually got scooped up by a scientific so-and-so, or, now I'm doing this, and that allows me to do my day, it allows me to do my art on the side. And I think that, even when you look back at, when you were hustling hard, is it Mozart? Is that Moe's, right? When I, you hear about you hustling, and yeah, your hustle is you building your community. It's you connecting with your people, right? And them supporting you over and over again, and just trying to find a community somewhere that's going to eventually be the people that you are connected with, that helps carry you to where you want to be in your future of glass, right? So however far that ends up, you want that to take you. For us, in my world, that's, hopefully forever. That's this is our long-term plan, is to be here doing this and being a part of the flameworking world. And so we've found connections throughout our 20 years of doing glassblowing in many, many, many avenues. I've done beads. We did a bead show. I did jewelry for many, many years. That's kind of where I first started doing a lot of my glass work. My husband did a lot of goblets, and he went to Salem as well, and took classes there, and with Emilio Santini. And so we kind of came back, and he started teaching, and we started, building a community with people within our own community of people who appreciated art, right? And that was amazing for us while we lived in Chicago. But eventually, we ended up moving to British Columbia, and we now live in a town of, our actual town, maybe 5,000 people, right? So much, much smaller. We're about 8 hours away from Vancouver. So it's a pretty big change for us. And with that, we had to obviously change, going from doing art shows and being directly communicative with our customers, literally having them walk off the street into our shop, and now we were working with people over long distances, and dealing with distributors. We moved a lot more into pipes, being in British Columbia, where it's legal. Here in Canada, it was legal much earlier. We're in the Kootenays specifically, which is amazing cannabis culture. And so moving into that, we were able to build an entire community of within the cannabis community, keeping us alive for a very, very long time within our industry as well, with flameworking, right? And so that has built for us for a long time. Then I would say we hit COVID, unfortunately, and we really saw a huge drop with just supply issues here in Canada was a huge issue. I don't know how much you all know about getting our glass up here, or our flameworking materials here in Canada. So most of our clear comes in from Pegasus, which happens to be in Ontario, right? We have a Pegasus distributor right here in Ontario, which is amazing for us here in Canada, but all of our color comes from the States. And so it's very hard to be competitive when you start to look at the art market, or even looking at like production scale, trying to be competitive with your pricing, right? That gets very, very difficult. And so again, it comes back to like you being able to like key into your community and what your community needs. And so during COVID, when our community was hit so hard and things shut down and people were quiet, and within the cannabis community, we lost our ability to connect, just having circles and hanging out and having our moments to talk and chat and share glass. And that's a huge part of what the cannabis community and the glass world is all about, right? And when we lost all of that, we also had to shift. And we were lucky enough to have our local scientific community step in and say, hey, we need somebody closer. We can't keep shipping this stuff so far away. You know, we can't keep trying to get our raw materials from the Czech Republic. This isn't working for us anymore. And you're our local glass blower. How can you make this work for us? You know? And so, yeah, my husband also does scientific repair for his local community and for our and also for the University of British Columbia, which is an amazing opportunity for us as well. But that's just like a piece of what we do. I feel like the glass world as a whole, like flameworking specifically, has been so incredibly good to us that like we have never been able to really let go of all the little things that we've done all these years to kind of keep us going. So there's like, but that is like those multiple streams of revenue, and all of our multiple streams of revenue all come from our glass world, you know? And so we're very, very dedicated to the glass world in that regard. And I think that that's like, it's showing in our work on many levels, which is kind of cool. And yeah, we have a recycled, like we do an upcycled glass work, and we have like a whole line of upcycled glass work where we take like the recycled bottles and stuff like that and turn them into different all different reusable goods. And then we have our pipes that we do, and most of that is through distribution. So I have large distributors in the States that go to like all the big trade shows and that kind of thing. So then that puts my work out in front of people without me having to be everywhere. I can still be home on my farm, you know. And then, like I said, just trying to make ourselves available to our immediate community. So when we were approached by someone who said, hey, can you do this for us? We said, let's see if we can make the skills work and make it work for you and make it work for us. And that's really worked out to our benefit as well. Oh, that's all.
That's so great. Thanks so much for sharing, especially about from your perspective in Canada. I did not know about the supply chain issues.
Oh, yeah.
We all experienced to some degree, but I'm interested to know how things have changed for those of you who have been working for, through this last few years of the pandemic and everything. Has there been a shift from in-person to online or anything like that? Has anybody found new audiences or had to find new audiences, kind of like Kristen was talking about, and pivot in the last few years? Sally.
Yeah.
There you go.
It was amazing when we went online, because I was teaching a scientific glassblowing class up at UMass Amherst, and all of a sudden we had to go online. And it was crazy. And all of a sudden they are starting to learn the history of glass, and I had to do different assignments, and it really opened up my mind to a lot of different things. And in some ways it was really good. Rather than going through the same thing that you do all the time, you're challenged by coming up with things. And so one thing I really enjoyed doing, I had everybody go to the history of painting and look at glass in paintings, and then tell me how they made those glass things in those paintings. Because, you look at some of the 18th century paintings, and some of that glass is like, that painter made that up, But how would you make that? Like, so it really opened my mind to different ways of teaching. So I really kind of appreciated it in some ways. Yeah.
Thanks, Sally. Percy. Hello.
Hey. I'm Percy. So when talking about like shifting towards online, I think I was going that direction anyways. So those of you that know that I do a podcast called Taming Lightning, and I talk about neon and plasma. That's kind of what I'm interested in making. Predominantly my skill sets are in the hot shop. So I'm using a lot of hot shop technique to make, but I'm also using, flameworking principles to get a better overall seal in the hot shop, and then finding ways I can use that in the flame shop as well. But it was interesting to do. Well, it's pretty easy to do like lectures online. It's not too different, but then setting up a space to do more demonstration. Like I did a Urban Glass hotline with Urban Glass where I talked about plasma and I combined it. You call it a lecmo, if anything, because I combined a lecture portion with the demonstration. And I find that because of how spread out both neon and plasma is, I have almost no choice but to kind of reach people predominantly through online references. And that's gotten me most recently a commission. I did a set of like plasma cups. Now I didn't make these borosilicate cups. I used double wall glass and kind of added my own tubulation and filled it with gases and whatnot. And so these people are coming to me from whatever I put out in the world, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, or whatnot. So it's been interesting to kind of starting to put my feet down and dig a little bit harder into pushing into that space with more direction than kind of being off to the side.
That's awesome, Percy. I think it also helps to have a radio voice like you have too. That makes the podcasting and the lecturing and everything like just everybody wants to listen to you, So that's so great that you've kind of found your niche in the world and with some a glass adjacent income stream. That's one of the things, and just talking with some people in the community lately that's been coming up. It's like, it seems like more and more folks, especially, like younger folks, I teach at a school, Salem Community College, and more folks are, say like monetizing their YouTube channel or live streaming or, doing more income generating activities with social media and connecting with an audience in order to sell their work through the internet. So, I was wondering if anybody has had an experience to that effect. That would be very cool. Oh, okay. Kristen.
Hey, yeah. We actually just started a YouTube show. I was approached back in July. So one of the things that I wanted to mention, we were talking a little bit about being online and, the opportunities there. And I would say that one of the biggest shifts that we saw, I think everyone on the planet saw after COVID or even during COVID, was that with everyone moving online and then learning and then kind of coming offline, we kind of rebuilt our communities to some degree, right? And so our communities became stronger. But because you were able to find people that you were able to maybe have a deeper connection with, or maybe able to have a more personable connection in certain ways, right? And so, and then at the same time, we're reaching out more globally, right? So like I'm able to be able to be here with you guys and talk about what we need to talk about in our flameworking community and build that way. And so, whereas before you might not necessarily have those same like deeper connections with the people that you're talking with online. Right. And so I feel like that's kind of grown for everybody. And that's really been an awesome thing that we all need to really like kind of grab a hold of. And so education has been a huge part of that. And so with legalization for us, we've seen people who are now walking into like dispensaries and such, who have never seen glass before, who don't know anything about flame working, who don't know that there's people here in their community that are glass blowers, that's how they survive and have raised their families for 20 years, you know? And so it's a whole new opportunity to educate people in what we do. And I think that that's a really cool thing for us. And the more we can get out there, the better that's going to be for everyone. Right. And so we have actually built a portable glass blowing studio, like a little a glass flameworking studio that we bring. We got it approved by the fire department. And so we can take it to our local art communities. We can bring it to different places where we can show and demonstrate what we do and just kind of share a little bit more about glass blowing in general or flame working in general, right? And so we were set up doing that for somebody back in July. And while we were there, we were approached by someone who actually they're just a YouTube producer. They just have all kinds of YouTube shows. And he said, "Hey, I want to do a glass blowing one. I need some content." So yeah, we're now actually doing a glass blowing show on YouTube. And I don't expect that it's going to make any money, honestly. I don't think that it's perhaps someday, but that's not why I did it. We did it as just an opportunity to kind of get more exposure and to bring more light to glass blowing in general and to flame working and to some of the struggles that we carry as glass blowers. I think a lot of people just don't know and take for granted. So it's important that we are out there and pursuing that with other people. So yeah,
that's awesome. And
YouTube show.
If you have a link, can you pop it in the chat so that we can watch it?
Sure. Yeah, it's called Gather Glass with Wildfire. And awesome. We did a podcast and then we did one live show, but it's just monthly, right? So it's going to be coming up once a month. And then I think next month we actually have Slinger, if you guys are familiar with Marble Slinger. So he's got a new movie that came out and stuff. So he's going to be doing an interview with us and such. So just some cool stuff. Just try to, like I said, get more exposure and let people know what we do.
Very cool. And cross-pollinate with other artists as well. So
that's right.
Visibility. Sally, did you have something to add? I can't hear you. Is that a no? No? Okay. All right. That's a no. Cool. Oh, thanks, Percy, for popping your podcast in there too. I know in one of the most recent meetings, Surf Rat Glass, he's not here with us tonight, but Surf Rat Glass had kind of went into depth about how he, during the pandemic, ended up kind of pivoting to find a new audience and ended up monetizing his Instagram account and creating content that way by live streaming and making videos. And I was really curious, I really kept thinking about that. I was just really curious to know if anybody else was doing that, if that was like kind of a wave that was happening, or what? Madeline.
Yeah, I also experienced that as a direct result of the pandemic. And then I probably have said this like the last time we met in the spring, but I started making TikTok videos because like they reached out to me and they were like, we want to make, in response to the pandemic, we want to make TikTok more educational. So like we want like makers and artists to come on and do like little educational videos. So like that's kind of how I started my whole practice of like doing this sort of like glass related content for the general public as the audience. And I didn't really think anything of it at the time, but it really has been a significant source of income for me. Like for a while, especially like Instagram reels were paying like a lot of money, like quit your day job type of money. And then they wised up to it, I think. And they were like, we're going to do that a little bit less now because they were trying to compete with TikTok because it was Facebook and they're like, everyone's going to TikTok. So like, let's pay creators. And now they're like, maybe less worried about it. And it's like, I'm just trying to take advantage of these like giant companies, like trying to compete off of each other. But it still is part of my practice and it's sort of a good way to just have like, if not like making like a significant amount of income from, videos, but at least keeping your audience engaged so that they're actively seeing what's happening as a way to just keep connecting with them and then maybe potentially selling work, to them. But also like, in addition to Chris and I started getting on the YouTube train too, because I think from what I can see, YouTube is sort of like the one social media that I think is in it for the long run, and it does have like the most potential for monetization. But also like live streams, I know that's a big thing. And to be honest, like I don't do a lot of them because I get like somehow nervous about it or something. But I do know that like on live streams, people will like, that can be a good income source because people will like send little like gifts or like flowers or something. And that is how a lot of people make their content or make the income from content. So I think that's a really interesting sort of new frontier as well.
Yeah, it's intriguing to think about this possibility of, making some. So let's say like you're in your studio, you're flame working, and you're making objects that you're going to sell, but then also being able to monetize that time that you're making too by having a live stream or something like that. That's just an interesting way to think about it, I think. And I also just want to mention here, Jolie bringing up. Would this be a time to bring up the issue of how the net is pretty much dominated by a handful of companies and have enormous amounts of influence on what gets seen and not seen? So that's always kind of a good thing to keep in mind as well. Sally, oh, never mind. Your hand's not raised, right? No. Okay. Okay, so we're about halfway through. So I'm going to swap places with Madeline, and she is going to pick up with the facilitation here, and she will continue calling on people and continue on with our next prompt.
Thanks, Amy. Hey, everyone. Yeah, so great to see you all and great to meet new faces and to meet new people. So I think the next sort of question I wanted to touch on is sort of getting into the nitty gritty. Like if you sell work or whatever it is you sell, maybe if it's merch or, production or services, how do you price your work, your content or your professional services? Like, do you have like a formula that you use? Do you kind of just feel it out depending on what the market is doing? So I think that's like always a fascinating question, and I'm curious about that. For me, as someone personally who just like has like my finger in a lot of pies or whatever, I kind of different ways of pricing it. So like, for instance, for my production, I sort of think of things like as like an hourly minimum rate that I want to make, and then, build in cost of materials. For things like commissions or fabrication for other artists, I think that's a lot less like cut and dry for me personally, because I build in a lot more time for like R&D. That always takes a lot more time than I think it will. Also, like with that, like commissions or customs or fabrication, like there's so much more shadow work than just being on the torch, right? There's like back and forth, there's email, there's taking and sending photos, do you like how it's looking, like and then that amount of time just adds up, and it's so easy to like let that just eat up so much of your time. So that is a little bit different for me. Often like they're working with like their own sort of like funding or grants or museum, so it's a little bit different. And then personally, like for my more like personal work, like my performance art or sculpture, that's a lot trickier for me to price because I will put like hundreds of hours on a piece. And I don't really make the piece to be like a commodity necessarily, or I don't really expect anyone to ever want to buy it because I don't want to put that pressure on the work that I specifically make, like for performance art. It's often like an object that is like used on the body or in video. And I'll show the work with the video performance in the shows, but it feels tricky to try to put like a number sign on that to reflect all of the time that goes into it. So that's like, I've kind of taken the burden. It's sort of a luxury of taking the burden off of that work. And that like thinking, okay, I don't need to like make this, monetarily viable. I don't need to make this piece, I don't have to sell this piece in order to be able to survive, because I make, I teach, and I do production and fabrication. Those are the income streams that support my personal art practice, and the personal art practice takes up a lot, equal amount of time. But that's kind of how I see it. Percy, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. When I think about it, I think art and what you're selling is a little bit easier because you can kind of reference towards maybe what other people are doing. So I'm going to speak more on like commissions or like services, which I advise like finding someone who does something similar and sort of doing a mentorship of some sort, because that could be very helpful. But commissions can be really tricky. I often find myself underpricing, especially a new project. And so you learn from that first thing and you start thinking about how you're going to develop a calculator. And I've kind of developed a calculator for myself where one, I'm doing I want to know how much I want to pay myself hourly. Then I want to make sure if I have to have an assistant, I include assistants. And I basically in my head go through what steps am I going to take to complete that project, how many days. And if I have an institution, like I work at the Pittsburgh Glass Center to make stuff, I look at their price ranges and I use that as part of my calculator. And that gives me a rough estimate. If it's something this is the first time I'm doing the project, then I'll go and bump it a few hundred to give me, time to make, I would say if there's any part of the process where I might have to redo something, I would maybe double a day and count that towards my top. And then that should be able to help me in case there is a time where I'm not getting this right and I'm messing up and things are getting delayed. So that's my tip for doing a commission. Now, the part where you need maybe a mentor is I do a service called technical consultation. So that could mean I would go, for example, I went out to Glass Axis, I serviced their manifold and organized their setup in that area. And that was a job I got from Ashley Goodwin. She kind of set me up for success on that one by providing some detailed notes on, okay, this is the problem I had when I was teaching here. Here's kind of what I think the next steps are. And so when I was approaching that, I had to make sure I was getting my money and I was getting the services paid. So I talked to someone like Rusty Rousseau, who's been great. And he says, okay, first of all, you want to make sure that you have your hourly down. So it chose $45 an hour. And then if I have to travel, then build your contract and put down lodging. If it means that you have to be there for a couple of days, request that they pay for lodging, set down some boundaries where you're not going there and end up doing nothing. So you don't want to waste your time when you're having to travel. So I set up saying, I'm only going to schedule time out there when, if I need a part, I have to, that the part's there first. So that's kind of how I've kind of figured that out. But then the other tricky part is if it's something where it's you know what you need to do, but you have to be there on site and you kind of do it bit by bit, then that kind of works. But it may be different. Say the next project I'm working on is helping a client repair a Paul side piece. And that means I have to come up with a sum total to cover the whole thing, because that's not something I can just go out there and figure out. There's too many unknown variables. And it's not oh, this system has a leak. So then we can go ahead and break down my steps for that. But if I'm doing something completely out of my wheelhouse and the person that made the piece isn't communicating, and the people who made the device that powers it is not able to be contacted, and the company doesn't know it because it's all these little small pieces, then you have to kind of work at a bigger number. And so you, again, still work with someone who's on that professional end, someone who could fill the gap. And you're asking them, okay, this person is an electrical engineer. He works with this particular power supply for plasma. And I go, okay, what's your price? What's your time period? What's your time thing? And then I start to kind of compile this together and make a bigger number. But that's something I'm still working out, and something that is probably the most difficult thing I can actually try to price out. So again, those are my tips for commission, consultation and then jumping over towards some bigger thing that can impact other people's ability to service devices that are out there, art pieces that are out there.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that, Percy. That's a really interesting perspective. Amy, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, as far as how to price different things, I have a few things I'd like to add. For sculpture or for fine artwork, there's definitely some kind of price breaks in the market where, you know, the one for small sculpture would be like 3,000 and under. And if you haven't sold a work for more than 3,000, you should do that first, and then go to the next, which would be like 3,000 to 5,000, and then from there 5,000 to 10,000. So what I've done is like try to make works that are kind of fit in that price range. And the galleries and the art fairs kind of use that type of pricing structure as well. So it's pretty easy to do research as far as who your competitors or your peers are. And then also like putting your prices up against like what the market will bear, right? So like what is the work going for at galleries and art fairs, whose work is selling and for what? So like kind of keeping an eye on that and doing a little bit of market research before you hop in will do you a long way and will get you a long way. And same thing with contemporary jewelry, same thing. It's like, unless you're making things that are like $500 and under, that's a totally different client. Like know your client and what their price range is, so that you can make sure that you're marketing to the right client with your price point. And then real quick, I want to echo what Percy was saying about like fabrication and consulting, which is that I break my invoices or my estimates down into 3 categories. Overhead, and that includes like studio rental, and I use the going rate for like a group studio in Brooklyn as like kind of the standard for that. Labor, so that includes my labor rate and then any assistance labor rates. Materials, an estimate for materials, and that includes shipping of materials. And then I add 20% to everything as a buffer. And so if I come in under the 20%, that's an extra profit, but I'm getting paid through the labor line on the invoice. So for that type of work, I'm a laborer and the rest are expenses. So that's kind of how I handle like fabrication and any kind of consulting that involves overhead of materials and facilities. Yeah.
Thanks, Amy. I'm curious if you don't mind sharing, like, do you structure your pricing for that, for your fabrication the same way you would price like your jewelry or like your sculpture, or is that like a slightly different model?
It's different for me because when I have my fabricator hat on, it's like I get paid per project. So the pieces are going up. Like as soon as I deliver the pieces or they get picked up, I'm not in charge of selling them or marketing them or anything like that. But when it comes to my own artwork, I have to accommodate for like the marketing. And so that's all included in my own overhead for my own work is different because it's going to include wearing more hats than my fabricator hat does, basically, if that makes sense. Yeah. And definitely. Also, but I do think it's super important to do your research and look at similar work in the marketplace. So know your competitors and your peers, right? They may be one and the same. And then know like what the market will bear. Like what does the landscape of the market that you're trying to enter into or be involved in look like? And then that'll help you just be realistic about your price point and your product and be confident about it too. And then if you're not getting a good response, then either your prices are out of whack or it's the wrong market for you. You know, not everybody is your client. So it's really important to be able to separate yourself from that, because it can get emotional when people say with jewelry, say, oh, you know, I love your work, but it's way too expensive. Well, maybe that's not my client. That's a possibility. So that's really important to remember. That's great advice. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Who is your audience, right? Going back to that question, and what's their price point? And also like sort of researching what the market will bear. I think I got really good advice from you, Amy, a little while ago, which is that like,
donating your work to auctions is such a great sort of research tool, because then you can see, oh, like what will what will people be willing to pay for one of these pieces or the specific type of piece? And it can actually be incredibly valuable to find that out. And then another one, because I learned a lot from doing that, donating to auctions. And then another one was I don't even know how, but I got tagged on something on Instagram. One of my production, implosion pendants, not even a big, important, sort of thing to me, but they, it was in an Instagram story and they reposted it and they were selling it, but for double the price that I had it on Etsy. And I was like, oh, wow, that is interesting. I'm going to up my Etsy prices. So talking about finding out what the market will bear, because I think for a lot of us, we tend to undervalue some of our work, and it's scary to really put what we think it's worth, but that's kind of a good little research tool. Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
So there's also the 10% rule too, or that's what I call it at least, which is make yearly goals. If you have a business, you should always have goals, short-term and long-term. And so this is what I did with jewelry over the years. I would make a collection of jewelry. I would have my goal for the year for sales, or so many of a certain piece. And then if you meet that goal, then you raise your prices 10%. But when you raise your prices 10%, you can expect to lose 10% of your clients. Right? But you'll be making the same amount of money, right? Because it's 10% more. So that's one way that you can raise your price point incrementally and build your business, but not lose money. And then your product becomes elevated in value that way.
That's a great point. I love that. Scrolling back up the chat for a second, I saw Molly said, I'm curious how people are handling the extras or seconds of the work that is still nice but isn't selling. What a great question. I'm curious about that too. Because for me, I feel like a lot of it, we wouldn't, as artists, putting something out there that's not I've been told, don't put, something that's a second out there, but at the same time, I'm I'll sell it to a friend for cheap or I'll just give it to a friend. I don't know. It's so hard to the difference between keeping it or throwing it away is a lot. Amy says, I destroy the seconds because after I'm gone, they might become mixed up with the first. That's a really interesting point, because we don't have control over it, what our legacy is. Molly says, most of my work is going through a gallery or through a couple of art fairs that I do locally, but my gallerist recently retired. I'm looking to get more things on my online shop. Yeah, I saw this really interesting thing I stumbled upon, kind of being a voyeur on TikTok recently. It was another glass person I follow on TikTok, and they were doing a studio clean out sale. And it was they were live on TikTok going through their sort of shelf and was everything's $5. Just type in the chat if you want to buy something and I'll ship it to you later. And I was this is so interesting. It's so tempting to do this. Just to clean stuff out. And I'm sort of curious about that, because at the same time, A, seems like a lot of work. B, that sort of you don't even know who's watching on a sort of platform like that. Percy says, speaking of auctions, when they sell, see if you can get contact with the buyer, because that adds to your audience. Great point. Janine says, I'll cannibalize the pieces and reconfigure them into new pieces of jewelry. That's really smart. And a few people were talking about using recycled glass earlier, which is kind of a smart economic move, as well as I kind of like the idea of getting limited, having creative limitations as a starting point for a piece. Okay, I see some people have their hand raised. Molly, go ahead.
Yeah, I was curious when you were talking about people doing their online sales, because I'm I see that too, and I'm so tempted to be I have all these pieces. I would love to sell them to my friend community for cheap, but then I'm ugh, I can't degrade the price of my work. So it's such a conflict, because we just moved, to give you a little background, and I'm packing boxes and boxes and boxes. I was I have made so much work. Why do I keep going to the studio? This is ridiculous. I don't know. It's a conflict of constantly being but they're still nice. Like they're not like, and some of them aren't even actually seconds. It's just like somebody hasn't bought it. So
exactly. Like it's sort of like older collecting dust and you like it, but you also don't want to hold on to it. Yeah, I'm like a hoarder of my own things, and it's so tempting. I started I had like an electrician come over to fix something in my house, and he was like, "Oh, I'll buy that from you," and I was like, "Okay, great," like because that normally would not be my audience at all, and it was kind of we did a little barter, and I bartered with my HVAC guy I got a new furnace, and I made him a set of elephants for his wife. So kind of fun things like that.
I do wonder if the bartering system, like, should we try to employ that more? Like, where have we forgotten to do that?
Exactly, especially with other artists, because like my friends' work or other glass artists' work is like part of my favorite thing to collect. But I'm not always trying to buy the primo version. So maybe a bartering seconds system.
Maybe we should do a glass exchange of artwork. Like people just like geeks it out. So.
I love that. The bartering system is alive and well. I supplement my income with barter. Yes, Amy, I know you are big into the trade currency and bartering. Brooke, go ahead. Or sorry, Kristen, go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to say a couple things. First of all, Robert, you said that soft glass can be hard to recycle. One of the things that we do here at our studio we have a vitrograph kiln. So if you're familiar with the vitrograph kiln, right, you can throw all your scraps into the pot and then you just run it through and let it, the glass comes out the bottom like a little stringer, and you get different size thickness of stringers. My husband does like vitrograph paintings is what he refers to them as, where he takes all these different strands and then lays them out into elements where he does like a scene kind of thing, right? You can use them in beadwork. You can take them to the flame. We sell them. We'll get like crazy, cool, amazing colors in the rods and such, and they make the most amazing beads. So you can sell them just the rods to bead ladies like crazy, as long as you know your COE, right? So that's like a big part of it. And so I soft glass, don't diss the fact that you can definitely recycle. All glass is recyclable, people. All glass is recyclable. Some way, reuse it. And Molly, the other thing I always say, we host, we have an open house in our studio once a year, and I'll put seconds out only then. And then it's kind of like you're face to face with the person. You can kind of talk to them about what maybe makes it not so perfect in your eyes, right? So you're not just sending it out in the world and be like, well, I hope, they notice that, or I hope it's okay when they get it, and so you kind of have that more personable. And then it kind of shows dedication from the person if they're actually willing to show up the day that you're having the event to sell your seconds. So if they're willing to come to your shop that day and be there, it's kind of like having a garage sale, kind of like, yay, we're all here and we're getting rid of the old stuff and people are excited to get their deal, and it's just a once a year hurrah. If you're not there, you don't show up, that, you miss out. But it kind of gives people that incentive to, maybe support you in the moment or, kind of clear out your shelves a little bit. So that's nothing. And then we do a lot of hide and seeks too at our studio. So that's another awesome thing to do with your seconds. Get them out in the world and just kind of hide them at events, or, and they can just go up on your social media and be like, hey, I put this at some random park, and just take a picture of the park, let people go find it. And again, it just is more about people being able to connect with you and find you on your, and be able to find you and kind of build that community. And, so just different thoughts.
Thanks, Kristen. I love the hide and seek idea a lot. I feel like kids are always doing, or students are always doing that at Salem, doing little hide and seeks and pretty cool stuff out there. Sally, do you want to say something, or is your hand just raised? All right, cool. Amy, go ahead.
It's just permanently. Sorry, I jumped the gun. It's permanently raised. Yeah.
I love it.
What did I lose my train of thought now? I feel like I lost my train of thought. It'll come back around.
Hide and seeks, studio sales.
Oh, I know what it was. To what Kristen was saying about community building and having that be important, because sales come after that, right? If you're just getting into selling your work, reaching out to your community is one of the best ways to do that, because your people want to support you. So start small, start with people that you know, for sure. And then you can branch out from there. And also, if you're using social media, then all of that activity that you're doing with promoting your work online or doing hide and seek and connecting with people online, same thing. You're building community, and then those people want to support you in turn by your work. And also help value your product by boosting your visibility, right, in the algorithm, and liking your account and sharing your account with other people. So all of those are marketing tools that we now have at our fingertips, which is pretty incredible.
I love this idea that Molly put in the chat about like hosting a dinner party and charging an entry fee, and then everyone could take an object home with them. And that's also great too, because it's like a way of building community and strengthening connections for like your market. One other thing that I just occurred to me is we were talking about like digital sort of streams of income. I don't know if any of you have heard of this app called Cameo. It's basically like a newish app where like you can like celebrity or whoever's on it, personalities are on it, and you can like pay them some sort of nominal fee to like send you a custom message, or like if it's your friend's birthday, they'll be like, "Hey Bob, like it's me, celebrity so-and-so, happy birthday from your friend," which is really funny because like, you're getting access to them, and they're like filming usually like in their kitchen, or it's like, on their phone. Like it's not really about like high quality or anything like that, which almost like gives like a greater sense of intimacy and greater value. But that was something that like I was in conversations with them about, because Cameo was interested in like, oh, maybe like it could be like an educational tool, and you could like, people could be like, how do you make a blah, blah, blah out of glass? Like, how do you make a glass animal or whatever? And then you can choose your price, like $5 for a video, 20 cents, like $20. Because you get to choose the price, and it says it next to your name, and they can decide if they want to do that or not. And then instead of being like, oh, I'm a celebrity, like here's your chance to talk to me, like it's almost like an information sharing exchange. So it's kind of interesting, and I think like anyone could be on it. So that's something I haven't really fully dabbled with, but I did see that I think Deb Teresco from Blown Away was on it, and I was like, oh, other glass people are on it. Custom glass videos, exactly. And the whole question of like pricing content, that is such a nebulous question for me, and kind of like a brave new world. And then like copyrights, like are you giving up like exclusive rights to your content or to your video? Are you letting like a big platform like repost one of your videos for free? Because often like they'll be like, hey, like we like this video, can we share it? And then they're making like tons of money off of your own content. So one thing I've started doing is being like, hey, thanks so much for asking, like, can you pay me? And most of the time they say no. And then I'll be like, okay, thanks, no. Do you own your content if you post it on? Back to that whole question of like these giant companies. Of course, they don't have our best interests at heart, but they help us get it out there. No, I love it. Sally, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I didn't realize I had my hand up all that time. You can like right tonight, I'm setting up an exhibit for my community. And because a lot of your neighbors don't know what you do, and so, basically I just got my glass blowing friends in the area, and I said, hey, bring some work and let's show it off. And we're putting up this exhibit, and people will learn about glass, and it might, bring it, I guess, to your community, hands-on visual stuff. It's kind of cool. All right. That's it.
That's great. Thank you for sharing, Sally. Amy asked in the chat, like, is it a sole licensing agreement where they have rights to your content, but you also retain the rights to use it as well? These are things that like a few years ago, I don't even know what that means. And now I'm becoming a lot more familiar with it. I don't ever like to give anything up personally, unless they're giving like they're giving some pretty good money, like at least like a couple $100. And if it's something that like I can easily recreate, but like change something, like a very slight little thing in it, then I can just recreate that content, but it's not the same thing. Probably talking to like a lawyer about that would be a good idea in the future. So I want to pivot to the next question, which is what professional practice topics are important right now? We're talking a little bit about that specifically in this day and age. And yeah, Amy, go ahead.
Well, the first thing I think of is media training. I started Flameworking 25 years ago, and the first art center that I worked at had our PR rep come in and give everybody media training so that we could be on the news to represent the art center. And I think about that today with people, you know, my students getting on Instagram and live streaming and like really putting themselves out there on social media. And I wonder like how y'all are learning that, and like what are the do's and don'ts? Like how are you picking it up, and does there need to be training about it? That's a conversation that we have at school a lot. For example, like just a couple of things to throw out there is like, don't wear green, you know, because of the whole green screen. And then also if you're asked a question or you're reading from the chat, try to give context to what you're saying so that your statements don't get taken out of context. Those are just some of the things that I remember from my media training, but I wonder what the equivalent is now and if we need something like that.
Yeah, I love those tips. And I wonder too, like, I think about it a lot because in undergrad, I had a business practices class. And we learned how to write a resume and make a business card. But the concept of like how to make a living as an artist never really came up, like the nitty gritty, like actually like how do you sell work? And this was a while ago, but I'm like wondering like has the conversation changed? Like this is something that I think looks really different for everybody, and it's a very different conversation. So like obviously for me, I feel like kind of like how to keep up a practice of like social media, if that's something you're interested in, or if not, like if you're not interested in that at all, because I know not everyone is, like is it like a relationship with galleries? How do you cold call a gallery? When do you cold call them? Do you just like walk in and talk to them? How do you enter into a market? What are the different types of markets? And kind of for me, I also think it's like balancing the right level of like professional persona and also like personal persona, especially like on the internet. Like, how do you seem like a real person, but also like kind of if you're interested in like cultivating your own your like brand, as it were. It's kind of, I think that might be part of in my new vocabulary of business practices. As well as documenting work. Like, how do you take pictures of work, or how do you maybe use the barter system to have like a friend take pictures for you? Because that I'm finding that documentation is everything. Does anyone have anything else to add as far as like what professional practice topics are you interested in or you think are important? Sally?
I think we really need to think about energy. How are we using energy? What are we making with that energy? Trying to, there's just so much waste, I feel. And we need to get a hold of that. Here we have this incredibly recyclable material, and are we using it to its fullest potential? Are we melting it? Sometimes, okay, I hope I don't piss anybody off here, but what COE is proper for what you're trying to do? what's the lowest temperature you can go to create what you want to make. You know, when I see the furnaces melting borosilicate, it reminds me of the 70s. We used to blow borosilicate marbles, and it was disgusting. All right. So we did that. We're done. We're done with that. You know, if you want to pull beautiful Marini cane, use 96, use 103, you know, like, you know, we really have to think about, you know, energy and how, you know, where are we setting our torches? What torch do we need to do this piece that we're making? You know, yeah, in the world is needing to get a handle on that. And as a studio practice, you need to get a handle on it too.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sally. As far as economics of your studio practice and as well as environmental concerns, I'm seeing some great things in the chat. Molly, thanks for the book recommendations. This looks really good. Joe says, I'm constantly surprised when artists don't understand some tech standards. Yep. It's a lot of people, even like peers or people who are like, you know, still in school now, they're like, I don't know how to I'm not good with technology. And like, I don't hold that against them. I'm no like tech wizard myself, but that also really seems like that's a huge part of like more and more being like as a professional practice. Percy talks about media training being an expansion of public speaking. Yeah, public speaking, that's a really good thing to practice. How to write a cover letter. Oh my God, the dreaded cover letter. Percy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to expand a little bit on that, like, because that's how I'm kind of thinking of it, like the media training being an expansion of public speaking. I remember hating it so much, but then, you know, I started doing podcasting, and much of that is I get to control the pacing by practicing the lines a million times. But then I'm also sometimes tossed into real-time situations where I've been receiving an award and all of a sudden I have to give a speech to like 50 people, or like I know that ahead of time I'm going to have to do a media thing, and then kind of remembering the kind of language and tone I want to present. But that can only happen really well if you think about it for the most part. If you're not like really thinking about that a lot, or maybe could be part of my anxiety that leads me to think about it a lot, you don't quite feel prepared for it. But you know, I witnessed the same thing about like the technology thing, where people aren't really tech savvy in some ways, or do you expect that to be part of their personal, you know, professional toolkit? But again, you know, if I'm going to kind of leech on to Sally's bringing about energy, also energy could be, where are you spending your time? Do we have to be the singular vessel for everything? Can we also, you know, rely on other people who are aligned with that sort of thing with the technology? Because as much as we want to be in control of a lot of our own things, to not have to rely on others, we simply do have to rely on others. Like we're doing that right now. So, you know, spending your time on certain skill sets, yeah, being cognizant enough to be able to approach those needs, I think that's definitely a part of it.
Thanks, Percy. Yeah, that's a great point. I love the point of like energy, personal energy, as well as like, you know, energy on a larger scale. Because like more and more, I feel like not really commodity of time, but maybe it is. It is like the economics of personal time. How are you spending it? Like when I decided, I think it was like within the past couple of years, like, okay, like I'm done like photographing my own work. Like it's, you know, it's expensive to have someone else do it, but like I will just spend the money, because if I do it myself, like I will spend all day, and the end result will not be as good as if like I got a professional to do it, and maybe I can barter with them, and, you know, we can have some sort of exchange going. But like, I think like the tendency to want to be everything and do everything for everybody and for yourself is such a strong kind of thing that it took me at least a long time to want to let go. But for me, like I'm glad I made that decision myself. Sally, did you want to add something? Or you're just raising the roof? Oh, you're muted.
I keep pressing the hand button accidentally.
That's all good.
But I think what Percy was saying, and what other people are saying, get people to take the photograph. If you can't take it, get things professionally done that you can't do. Don't waste your time reinventing the wheel. So, yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. Robert. Robert, did you want to add something? You're muted.
Okay. Hi. I just wanted to touch on the energy aspect for a moment, and the recyclability in general. It's when obviously energy consumption is a huge topic now, and approaching making things with the intent of successfully creating the unique thing, not maybe so specific to the product, or like just like churning shit out. Excuse me. And when we make things, we should be cognizant of the fact that we're trying to build useful. But that's that's problematic, I guess, when you're thinking about art and making art, because what's that, right? Anyway, thank you.
I love it. Sometimes questions are better than answers, I think. Molly said, making, just hopping back to the chat, like having a good photograph. I find the same thing where it's like, you never know what opportunities are from this one photograph that maybe you paid like a lot of money to do it, but like, how can you even put a price tag on that? I know maybe you don't put a price tag on it, but like it can be so invaluable. And then it can also go back to supporting other artists too. And this question of energy and kind of like studio usage and things like that, it kind of rolls into my last question for the group, or my last topic, which is how does the impact of economics affect your studio practice? And we've been talking about this a bit this whole evening. But, like, I know there's like different price concerns for material, cost of gas, inflation's gone up a whole lot. And I do personally consider like flameworking to be one of the most economic forms of hot glass working, with like much less overhead than other forms of hot glass working. But, what are other ways that how does economics impact your studio practice? Is it impacting it more now? Is it kind of like you have a smooth sailing? So Amy, go ahead, please.
I realize this doesn't affect everybody, but my middle range sales haven't been great. But the low end is like the lesser priced items do well. And then also the very higher priced items do well, but the middle market, not so well. It seems like, I'm better off spending my time making large pieces that are like targeted towards folks who are like maybe in the 1%, where, any kind of swing in the economy isn't going to affect their ability to purchase art. And then also the lower end affordable stuff, because in recession times, like that's something where people can still want to support you as an artist. And it's community building to be able to, offer work for sale for that audience as well. So I've kind of cut out the mid-price items, and just so I can focus on the kind of the top and the bottom of the market.
That's a really interesting perspective. I kind of love to hear it. Thanks, Amy. Molly, go ahead. You're muted.
I was like, I'm talking to no one right now. So I was going to say something similar that like I've seen like a lot of stagnation in some things and then like really big commissions coming through. Mind you, this is more of my hot glass or hot shop related things. But just from an economic standpoint, I've been thinking I'm currently a PhD student at Ohio State University. So I've been getting access to their shop rental time. Like I don't have to rent time, right? So I've been slowly acquiring material to build a flameworking studio at home because I'm just like, well, if I'm going to afford anything, I'm going to be able to do these very intricate small things at home, and then I can work on them with less rental time in the hot shop. But also just knowing that like those smaller things, like Amy was saying, like those are selling. Like if I can sell something in the $45 to $75 price range, I can sell a lot of those and they don't take a lot of time to make. So that's what I'm kind of shifting focus to like small things that can be used on bigger stuff and, making sure I'm being productive. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Molly. Oh, did you have something else to add?
No.
You're just raising the roof.
I just thought I had. Anyway, I accidentally raised my hand again. I'm pulling a Sally over here. So.
Doing great. Pulling a Sally. I love it. Amy, can you touch on NFTs real quick?
Sure. That's a format I've been experimenting with lately, and had some correspondence with people in the group. Several people in the group actually about this over time. But anyway, I just had so I make glass lenses, and then I photograph, or I use them on my camera and I make digital images through them. And rather than making them into photographs, I opted to make them into NFTs so that they can stay in the digital realm. And I've been really hesitant to use the NFTs as a format because of the carbon footprint. It's basically like transacting pure energy, which there's something graceful about that, but also like horrible. So I still have mixed feelings about it. So last week I did a little drop, and I use a platform called Rarible. And the thing that sold it for me is that you can list the NFTs without paying the gas fees. So I can offer them for sale with no blockchain activity. That's what's really really dirty until the transaction takes place. So I feel like that's a way that I could minimize. I wouldn't have to mint them all up front, and they just get minted, and the gas fee just get used at the transaction. On the event of the transaction. And I also just want to say that actually I had a really interesting conversation with Joe Lee early on when I was starting to think about NFTs, and he did the math, and he had told me that my one NFT that I minted was the equivalent of firing about 2 ceramic kilns. So as glass workers, we can kind of understand that a little bit. And so I thought that was really helpful, Joe. Thank you for that, with giving like the visual and kind of translating that into like ceramic and glassmaker terminology, because it really did make me think twice about using that format. So this is kind of the solution that I found to conceptually explore the NFTs.
That's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh, one more thing is that I am able to just blow one lens and then use that to make like an infinite amount of images too. So I like that idea of like making tools and then being able to use those tools to generate art.
Cool. Thanks, Amy. The whole NFT thing is so interesting. But it's cool that on the platform you discussed, you can list it, and then it's for sale, but it's not using the really energy heavy process, right?
Only the transaction when it gets bought or sold, like through the blockchain. That's the yes, exactly.
Cool.
So it hasn't been added to the blockchain yet.
Yeah, and it's also like you mentioned the NFTs as sort of a like an alternative to print, like selling prints, right? or like a way to keep them in the digital realm. And then like, I'm just so fascinated by this idea of like translating, you know, the energy to make an NFT or transact an NFT versus like firing a kiln or printing and shipping and, you know, paying for the shipment of a frame or whatever. So that's an interesting way to put these things.
So I've been projecting them, and I like that idea that it doesn't have to have a physical format, but it can come into the physical world by projecting. So I've been projecting them on sculptures, stuff like that. I don't know how much more I'm going to work with that format, but it's been really interesting and fruitful conceptually, because there are also a number of curators who I've been able to have conversations with about this, and it's just I think it's been fruitful in like community building, you know, to be able to have conversations in various parts of the art world about this format.
Agreed.
And Joe Lee is a great person. If you want to talk about NFTs, he's a really good person to go down the rabbit hole. And I'm Joe. I just want to say that I'm interested in the follow up as well, because I have some new thoughts. So we'll take it off the chat later.
That's so interesting. Thanks, Joe. And Joe also said something I thought was just interesting. If I focus on economics, it constrains what I can do too much. In order to take into account economics, I have to focus on a larger popular audience. I'm not really interested in either consuming or producing things for that, which I think is like totally fair. My interests are very niche. In order to be in that area, I can't maximize economics. Those things need to be mutually exclusive. And I kind of find that too, like, that's why, you know, for me, at least, like kind of having like a day job or like a teaching job, and then like not trying to put this burden of like economic security on certain parts of my work, has been kind of a helpful thing for me, like in a conceptual way. Awesome. Is there anything else anyone would like to share about anything we've touched on or haven't touched on yet relating to this meeting? I think this has been a really great conversation. And thank you all so much. It's been so great. Oh yeah, Ben, go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Ben from GEEX. I have a really fun question, and I don't know if we've asked this in the chat yet, so just go ahead and chime in if we have. But I was also thinking, it's so easy to like burn money on equipment and supplies. So I kind of had a fun question of like, are there any either like a piece of stock or a tool or like an investment you made that you have so many regrets about? Because I feel like a lot of us have had those moments where we're like, oh my God, I wanted this. And then we got it. And we're like, oh, I totally didn't need this.
I love that question, by the way. Sally, go ahead.
That's a really good question, you know, because I see all these people totally into all these tools. And in my head, I'm like, isn't a butter knife going to give you the same result? You know, you know, that's my favorite tool is my housemate's butter knife. So, but yeah, good question.
I love it. Yeah, for me, a free butter knife that I stole from my parents' kitchen, like back in the day, that's my favorite tool. Yep. Has to be stolen though. Kristen, go ahead.
I've probably bought more pairs of grabbers than I will ever need. And every time I buy them, I'm always like, they never hold the way I want them to. They never work. I'm always disappointed. And then they just sit there. And I don't know why I do it. I have a pair of tongs that I just, you know, barbecue tongs that I just wrap up with Kevlar tape, and they work better than anything. But that's probably, yeah, I probably put at least three pairs of grabbers. I have never been able to figure out.
I love that. It's like you're just collecting them, almost like your own little grabber collection. Amy, go ahead.
When I go to conferences or when I buy glass in person, there are certain colors that I only pick out in person, and I never ever use them. And they're like I don't even know what they're called, but like they look black and then they turn like kind of bluish and kind of rainbowy. I never have used any of them, and I have a big box full of them. But for some reason, I'm like so seduced by that one particular kind of tube whenever I go to any kind of glass event. I don't know why.
Like, I just have to hoard this for later.
Yeah, it's a total hoarding, mentality for sure.
I'm also like a hoarder too. Like, I'll hoard tools and stuff like that in color and like just never want to use it. But like, it's so much fun to just collect it. Ben, go ahead. Did you want to add something?
I think mine would probably be for pattern making. There's this old type of pattern that a lot of neon people would use that had fiberglass elements to it, but it's so noxious and it makes like the weirdest smell when you actually use it. So it's just paper and a wire screen is all I need.
Smart. Yeah, sometimes the simplest solutions, I feel like, are nice. And for me, like kind of like going to like, I'm at Pilchuck right now, for instance, and it's been my studio for the past month, and like paring down like my toolbox to whatever I could like fit on a plane. I'm like, okay, like these are really the essentials right here. And I'm like so much of a hoarder, I've realized like so many of my tools I actually don't use, but it's fun. Oh, and one other really interesting funny thing is last time I was at a conference, or a few years ago, I bought like a couple pounds of this color. It was like an India green that was like, it was super cheap. And I was like, this is a really ugly color. Like, I don't like it. I'll just save it for really cheap production. And then I think I saw like on Instagram or something like someone was like auctioning off, I think Mike Shelbo was auctioning off like a pound of like this India green. And I was like, oh, is this like, this is what a brilliant joke this is. Like, oh, haha. And everyone was like, oh, I want to get it. And then apparently it's been just a discontinued color. So what was like once a very, very cheap color is now people are like dying to get it because it's really good for, I think, like Marini or Millie's, and in cases really good. And a lot of greens don't do that. So that's so hilarious to me because just being a hoarder, sometimes it pays off with some of these colors. Like they get discontinued and the value skyrockets. It's so funny. And it validates the wording. Sally, do you want to add anything?
I pressed that button again.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we give you the voice if you want to add something, because I love whatever you have to say. No, it's totally good. Awesome. Thank you for that great question, Ben. It's such a fun one. So I think that if no one else has anything to add, I think I might pass it back to Amy, who's going to wrap up and just tell us about our next meeting coming up.
Thanks, Madeline. I just want to give everybody a shout out. Thank you so much for coming and for participating in the discussion. It's really great to hear from our regulars and then also some new voices too. So thank you all for contributing. So I just wanted to give you a little preview of our next meeting. So our next meeting is going to be in March at some point, and our theme is equity and access in public and private spaces. And I can give you a little bit of a heads up on some of our discussion topics. We're going to be asking, how do you access a studio? How do you work? Do you work or rent studio time or have your own shop? As a student or a co-learner, do you prefer a particular format or location? Where do you go to learn and why? What do you look for in a shared space that makes you feel safe and want to work there? So we can kind of start talking about some of those things. And also, there's usually a number of people who tune in from the studio itself. So we also want to open it up for folks to share a rapid fire tour of your studio space in 2 minutes or less. So we want to give you the heads up on that so you can plan ahead. If you want to give us a little rapid fire tour of your studio, we would love to check it out. Sally, yes, you're muted. Are we going to see your studio next time?
Does that mean I have to clean it?
No.
Please don't. But we thought we would try something new in response to some of the questionnaire responses that we got back about, kind of being more interactive and maybe starting to see what people's spaces look like and talking more about the work that we all make. So we can look forward to that. And we will have more information coming to you as we get closer to that date, but our next meeting will be in March. So thanks again and good night.
So great to see you, and thank you so much for tuning in and for participating. And don't clean your studio. Make us all feel better about the shape of our studios.
Hey, this is Emily from GEEX, aka the Glass Education Exchange. GEEX is an online platform connecting people and sharing materials in the collective field of glass education. That's a bit of a mouthful. So what does it actually mean? GEEX creates supportive spaces outside of traditional academic structures to offer community building programming and resources. Programs like the Flame Affinity Group offer a space for constructive dialogue between practitioners in the field. We're hoping to nudge the field of glass into its next generation through new models of community support. This recording is also available through one of our initiatives, the Glass Resource Exchange. The Glass Resource Exchange is a user-contributed library collecting and sharing educational material like articles, supply lists, videos, and more. We're hoping to see it grow as a common resource supporting glass teaching and learning. Want to support GEEX? Small donations really help us continue building our communal programming. Alternatively, you can subscribe to our lecture series, featuring outstanding glass artists and researchers. Learn more at geeks.glass/support. Thanks for watching. Want updates on new GEEX programs and resources? Follow @GeeksGlass on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, or visit our website, geeks.glass. Thanks again, and stay tuned.